state of the state address in an election year is always going to serve two purposes. It's going to be the opportunity for the governor to set the agenda for the remainder of the year, but also to kind of stake out his or her grounds in terms of what they want to say for the upcoming election. Governor Whitmer is seeking re-election, and the themes that she appears to be pivoting to make sense in terms of that re-election effort. Prior to the State of the State address this year, she went on something she refers to as the Believe in Michigan tour, and she's soliciting comments and experiences from people around the state as to why they believe in Michigan. I believe what we're going to see is a change in tone, looking more specifically at some of the big kind of kitchen table meat and potatoes issues that are going to be important to voters in 2022 and beyond.
Okay. Certainly a lot of just back and forth with GOP on several different fronts. The recent Auditor General report regarding nursing home deaths to some school districts still being in remote learning situations. What are your thoughts on some of the challenges she faces and kind of the tone she really has to strike tonight to counter some of those criticisms?
Absolutely. So early decisions in the pandemic are going to be the ones that are going to be as risky as possible, most likely for political leaders, and are going to have the most consequences. Knowing what we know now about the coronavirus and the way that it moves in between immunocompromised people, we may have wanted to see different decisions made at any level, from what we're doing in schools all the way up to what we did for the people who are in senior and assisted living facilities. There is going to be some accountability on all those levels. I think the question is going to be, are they able to, are her critics able to lay those at her feet and decide that she is the one that is responsible for some of those issues? Or is she able to depict them as, the result of an imperfect decision made at an imperfect time? That's a political fight. I mean, the reality is the coronavirus is powerful, and it's dominating much of what we think and talk about nowadays, both socially and politically. There were no good decisions to be made in those early days, but the way in which political actors, including the comments we're going to hear from both sides tonight in regards to the state of the state, try to paint those issues and lay blame, that's going to be difficult for both sides.
The GOP has come out and said, it is going to be coming out with ads sooner than it usually does this year. I mean, what does that say to you? What do you glean from that?
I think they see Michigan as a swing state. They see Whitmer's poll numbers hovering in the neighborhood of 50%. You'll see some that are slightly to the positive, some where she's slightly underwater. And they think they have a chance to pick up this gubernatorial seat. They're looking at things like inflation and supply side issues in the state of Michigan and thinking that they can make a state or a case that says, this is a result of poor leadership. On the other hand, Governor Whitmer, I expect, will point to the fact that we've gotten a lot of big wins over the course of her first term, things varying from a nationally relevant and successful response to the coronavirus, at least compared to some other states, the $7 billion investment from General Motors. And again, I think those kitchen table issues I pointed to. The reality is global inflation's at 5%. This is not something that's limited to the state of Michigan, and I think she's going to try to make that case in her defense. How much it sticks will be largely up to how political messaging works. Looking at it, especially, and this probably is true for almost any incumbent around the country right now, the divided nature of our politics has put people from both parties in a position where making good on promises has become even more problematic than it usually is, and it's normally pretty difficult. I would expect to hear comments about things like our transportation and infrastructure elements, partnering with some of the monies that have come from the federal government. I expect to see comments from the governor concerning some of their budgetary surplus and how that's going to work to help shore up our education, both at K-12 and in higher education. I think what we're seeing shape up for 2022 is what promises to be a very, very close race, what could be a very acrimonious race, and hopefully one that in the end will serve the interests of the people of the state of Michigan.
We hit on some recent polling. There's one that I wanted to point out from, I believe it's the Detroit News, and click on Detroit, which has her peg right around, 56%. That's a pretty sizable jump from last fall, if you believe the metric. What does something like that say to you? Her, apparently gaining gaining some ground as we enter an election year just ahead of the state of the state.
Mhm. I think it's important to lay at least 2 seconds of context to any polling that we see nowadays. Pollsters are having more difficult times reaching diverse populations of voters. Pivots to cell phones, internet opt-in polls can make polling somewhat, opaque. But in terms of seeing an increase in polling going into an election year, always something that a candidate wants to see. But what we have across the state of Michigan are people who are dealing with the reality of what is a transforming economy, of things like this great resignation we appear to be living through, and major impact of large governmental programs such as the federal level child tax credit. And in general, many people don't draw big lines of distinction between what government is doing for them and which government is doing it. Right. So Whitmer may be seeing some additional boost from successful federal programs aimed at mitigating child poverty, just like Whitmer may also see some blowback for the inability of the Biden administration to pass through its voting rights measures against Republican resistance in the Senate. So I think part of the polling you're seeing will be larger national trends reflecting on the state of Michigan. And part of it will be that, Whitmer has provided some pretty steady leadership. Now, people may disagree with its direction, but it has been steady.
Sure, Sue made some very valid points there. So, given all of that, and the stakes really this year, how important is it for her to make her case to voters tonight? I think, a pretty familiar criticism of, the Democratic Party is they don't necessarily excel at self-promotion in the way that, the GOP might. So yeah, what are your thoughts there?
I think that she's broadcast her strategy, and this I Believe tour across the state of Michigan is tapping into a idea that people want government to be concerned with the same things that they're concerned about, right? And the Democratic Party is trying to stake out a position here, both with its supporting of working rights and looking at kind of your blue collar kitchen table issues that say, hey, look, we're the ones that are trying to work to support this. We're the ones that are coming at this with an agenda. Republicans are going to try to undermine that narrative, but that I think is what we're going to hear from the governor tonight. That she wants to focus the apparatus of government on the issues that are most relevant to people who are sitting somewhere right now trying to figure out how they're going to manage, childcare with their kids at home, and how they're going to, deal with alternating working from home and working from work, and anxieties about kind of emerging into society with a pandemic going on. And if those are the issues that frame the election, then steady leadership and a calm approach will probably be more successful with voters. If this becomes about bigger national trends that in many ways, the governor has limited power to address, then it could be anybody's game.